With the NHL trade deadline just under a week away, Shawn, things are really, really wild already in the National Hockey League, as 13 deals have been completed so far in the last 8-9 days, and we anticipate a few more.
I think wild's been a bit of an understatement for this trade deadline so far. Expecting to see a bit more coming up, though, too.
Yeah, absolutely. And being here in Toronto, where the Leafs have already traded away Francois Beauchemin, Chris Versteeg, and Thomas Caberlet, they're not done. They're going to be moving a few more bodies, but they're also going to be bringing in a few more as well.
We mentioned the loss of Thomas Caberlet for the Leafs. It's a big loss, but that does leave an open spot for Toronto's decor. Rumor seems to be John Michael Lyles. It could be a good fit here in Toronto. He's a very similar player to Thomas Caberlet. Very similar cap hit as well. 4.425 this season, 4.55 next season. Thomas Caberlet was right around the mark of about 4.25. Very similar in the point category too. Lyles, 6 goals and 30 assists this year. Caberlet, 3 goals, 35 assists. So very similar type players, very offensive, a lot of assists. They can run a very good power play. And I think with the Leafs shipping out Caberlet, they need to bring someone in and replace them. Lyles seems to be the perfect fit as of now.
Absolutely. And, he's not just the rental player, as you talked about. He's signed for next season as well. So it gives the Leafs a bit of an easier task in transitioning the roster for next season. And, of course, like I mentioned earlier, there are going to be other players that could be shipped out. Fredrik Sorstrom is one guy, a veteran type of a player who can solidify a third or fourth unit for a playoff-bound team. We could see him being shipped out over the next week. And there are other guys out there that the Leafs are getting calls about. Grabowski, MacArthur's, though it's going to take a lot more for Brian Burke to pull the trigger on one of those guys.
There's a lot of players right now in the mix. We've seen Brad Richards. Toronto, among many other teams, are interested in Brad Richards. He's got a concussion right now, so no one knows exactly what is going on with his health situation, but we know a few teams are after him, Toronto being one of them. It'll be interesting to see how that plays out over the next year. Toronto not worried as much about his concussion, like you said, looking more long-term than short-term. Some other teams, though, a little bit worried about signing a guy or bringing a guy in who currently has a concussion. We've seen how much of an impact concussions have had this season. Teams might be scared off by that a little bit. Absolutely,
and ultimately it's going to come down to what happens in Dallas could stay in Dallas, and ultimately meaning if the Stars go to Brad Richards and say, look, for the better of the team, we need to move you. We've got to get some pieces in place just because of the ownership situation. He'll consider it, and chances are if Joe Nieuwendyk says, we got to move you, he'll say yes.
Well, you mentioned he does have a no-trade clause, so basically all the power is in Brad Richards' hands, as well as Joe Nieuwendyk. If like you said, if he comes to him and says, we would like to move you, it'll help our team, there's no denying that Brad Richards would probably say yes. I give you my permission to deal me. Also, you want to take a look, Dallas currently in a playoff position.
Yep.
As we go along the next little bit, they'll start looking at their standings, they'll start looking at their points, and think how realistic it is for them to make the playoffs. And if keeping a guy like Brad Richards around, a big asset like that, is smart to make a playoff push, or shipping him out, trying to get some nice return for him, would be the good long-term move.
Yeah, and then the Stars already making one significant deal yesterday. I understand they dealt away James Neal. I understand a lot of people are upset about that. But Alex Goligoski is a tremendously gifted offensive defenseman who really hasn't had the opportunity to really shine in Pittsburgh, with guys like Gonchar being there prior to this season. Of course, you have Chris Letang, and then Mahalik coming in as well. Goligoski is going to get the ice time to prove that he is a replacement for what Sergei Zubov used to be for the Stars.
Well, I think you mentioned a lot of people are upset about James Neal leaving. James Neal's the type of player who every team loves to have. He's a hard-working, gritty forward who puts up a lot of points, and he does. Year after year, he scored a fair amount. He has 21 goals in the season so far this year. But like you said, Goligoski, he's a big-time defenseman, not necessarily the best role for him in Pittsburgh. He can jump right into Dallas. He can be a big-time player. He can be a big-time D. And I think Dallas right now needs that. And I think Pittsburgh needs a guy like James Neal, possibly to play with Crosby. Just a little bit, they're going through some offensive issues. A guy like Neal can come in, spark some offense, and eventually be a good winger for Sidney Crosby.
So stick with us throughout the entire week as we bring you wall-to-wall coverage of the NHL trade deadline, of course, presented by Budweiser. So for Shawn, McKenzie, I'm David Pagnotta. We'll catch you in just a little bit.